Hey folks, so today we're going to look at the amplitude of the sine and cosine curve. But first, in blue, I want to, I want to graph the sine curve, and you really have to memorize these graphs. Sine curve starts even Steven, then at pi over 2 it goes up to a 1, then it crosses back over and it goes down to a -1, and then finishes even Steven. So this is your normal sine curve, and these are nice smooth rounded curves. And I needed to go a little bit further, but again, I am writing this with a mouse. And for most of these, if I had more time in the year, we would be taking this whole graph, and I'll show you what I mean. We might shift the midline maybe up at a 2, but we're probably not going to get to that because we only have this week left. But please make sure that, again, sine curve starts even Steven, goes high, crosses, goes low, and crosses. For now, I will call the x-axis the midline. Now in orange, here we have, let me change my color here. We have a 3 sitting out in front. And that 3 is actually standing for the amplitude. And what it does is it stretches this graph up a little higher, all the way up to 3, crosses. Oops, I got to move down a little bit. It's going to go down here to a 3 at 3 pi over 2, and then we're back to even Steven. So it crosses, goes high, crosses, goes low, and then crosses. And again, these should be nice, smooth, rounded curves. So I guess we could say that the absolute value of a, when it's greater than a 1, it's going to stretch that graph. It stretches the graph, just like that. Instead of going up to a 1, we go up to a 3. All right, let's move on. Cosine graph. Well, I'm going to graph that in blue first. The normal cosine curve, and I've even underlined it. Now, as you know, whoops, I put in some extra markings here, and you only have to graph this for one complete cycle. And if we were in school, I'd give you this setup here, just even markings even. So again, cosine, it starts high. Sorry, let me get on my pen. Starts high, crosses, goes low, crosses, and finishes high. So that's your normal cosine graph. And let me just shrink that down a little bit. Okay, and let me try to make this as nice as I can. And I'm writing with a mouse. Oh, that looks pretty wonderful, Shets. You are just so fabulous. Okay, now we're going to graph this 1/2 cosine. Again, we're doing cosine curve. So, instead of going up to a 1, we only go up to a 1/2. Crosses, goes low only to a 1/2. Crosses, and only goes up to a 1/2. So it's kind of like somebody stepped on, and let me change my size of my writing utensil. It's like somebody squished the graph. And I'll go slowly so I can make it super pretty and smooth rounded curves. There you go. So it doesn't go all the way up to 1, it only goes to a 1/2. I guess we could put squishes. So that's going to squish the graph. There you go. All right, let's move on. We're on slide number 7 now. And that A in front is called the amplitude. Amplitude is always positive and will represent the height of the graph. So let me go back and show you the amplitude. I will do it in green. And then for this one right here, y equals 3x, this is the highest point back to the midline. And you can see I was a little off. I could be bad and just move that slightly over. So this is the amplitude, and let me put a green A there for you. So that's the amplitude that we're talking about. That's how the number in front of the word, sine or cosine, will affect the graph. So let me just hide this a second. So what do you think is going to happen if A is less than 0? I hope you said it's going to flip the graph. So let me graph these as normal first. Normal sine would start even Steven, goes up, crosses, goes low, and finishes even Steven. So this is the normal sine graph. And yeah, I did shrink that. So there's your normal sine graph. Almost made that one. And in orange, I will do this guy. We start even Steven, but wait, folks, instead of going up, we're going to go down. And then it crosses and goes up and then finishes even Steven. So this is the graph in orange. Y equals negative sine of x. Kind of missed this guy a little bit, but you get the idea. It's going to flip the graph. Let's do a cosine guy. Okay, so let me get back to the blue and do a normal cosine first. Normal cosine starts high, crosses, goes low, crosses, and finishes high. Oh, that's a little too high. I'm not going to worry about it. So here we go for the normal cosine graph. Oh, that looks pretty darn good. Now in orange, I'll do y equals negative. Well, I should say the opposite of cosine of x. So instead of starting high, guess what? We have to start low, cross, high, cross, and low. And that looks pretty good. So here's my answer right here in orange. And I didn't make that too curvy. Well, I got better at the end, but this could have been a little coming out there a little bit, just to make it look pretty. And maybe I can use my eraser to jazz it up. That looks a little better. So, if A is less than 0, the curve flips. Or maybe you want to say it reflects over the x-axis. But I'd rather say the midline because, like I said, if I had more time with you, we're going to take this graph and move it. Let's say the midline was a 3. Well, that's what would happen. So it does get reflected. So there you go. And it's a reflection of that. Now, tonight's homework will be slides 8 through 11. We're going to start out easy and then get a little more complicated. So just remember, your opposite sign in front flips the graph. I'll try to use your lingo and keep life easy. It's going to flip the graph, and then you have to worry about the amplitude. This is your amplitude going all the way up to a 3. Normally it's a 1, but now in orange, it's all the way up to a 3. Look down here. We only had to go up a half instead of a whole 1 because You know, I could throw a 1 in front of this and not change anything. But this guy's only going up to a half. So your homework's going to be, you need to do these pages 8 through 11. And make sure that you understand where the sine curve starts. Even Steven goes high, crosses goes low, back to even Steven, and then cosine graph. Normally it starts high, crosses low, crosses high. I put that in your notes yesterday, but today I am stressing it. Hey folks, that's all you have to do. You have a great day. Bye-bye.